Is it wrong that I have a boatload of nostalgia for movie tie-in video games? I accept that most were at best middling or at worst hasty cash grabs, and yeah, I don't think that the existence of a video game tie-in to the 2006 film Eragon is to the betterment of humanity, but damn it, if I loved Eragon and I wanted to feel like I was living in that world, I could play it on Xbox, on PS2, on Nintendo DS, on Game Boy Advance, PSP, Windows.
The list is endless.
And I don't feel like we really have that so much these days in contrast with, like, you know, in my experience anyway, the 90s and early 2000s. I mean, yes, we still have games based around movie IP characters, but that's a different thing to a game that's essentially telling the same story as a specific film. Similar to novelizations, it just feels like technology and appetites have shifted, and these things are no longer seen as terribly valuable marketing commodities, exemplified, I think, by the fact that No Time to Die received precisely 0 video game tie-ins, while The World Is Not Enough received 3 totally different adaptations for 3 different consoles.
Let's count to 3.
Good evening, Mr. Bond fans. Yes, I know I love mentioning this, I know I love making a joke out of it, but my god, somebody at EA Games must have really loved The World Is Not Enough in order for there to exist a PS1 game, an N64 game, and a Game Boy Color game, and none of them even came out to tie into the release of the film. The game I'm going to talk about today came out 2 years after the movie did. The N64 version was developed by Eurocom, the PS1 version by Black Ops Entertainment, and the Game Boy Color version by 2N Productions, a company that doesn't have its own Wikipedia page and only seemed to produce 3 games in its lifetime, all for the Game Boy Color, and then it ceased to exist after releasing The World Is Not Enough. Bodes well for the playthrough. Despite my firmly being a young Bond obsessive back in 2001, I never actually owned this particular release. As I think I've mentioned in previous videos, I had the PS1 version of The World Is Not Enough, and I just kind of assumed that they were all probably the same thing, and the Game Boy one obviously wouldn't be as advanced as a PlayStation version, so I just never really sought it out. Looking back, it did seem to have some fair reviews at the time it was released, so I was somewhat interested to come back to it now as an adult. Obviously, this was made for a console with a D-pad and limited buttons, so I'm not expecting it to be as in-depth as the home console versions, but hey, I have a real soft spot for the GBA release of Everything or Nothing, so I'm totally open to enjoying handheld Bond for what he is.
Have I ever let you down? Frequently.
The game opens with an assortment of logos and a gun barrel sequence, which I think is actually pretty well done given the limitations of the technology. Bond's stride is much better here than whatever Ministry of Silly Walks conference he was heading to in GBA Everything or Nothing. Into the menu, which curiously features a blocky pixelated rendering of Pierce Brosnan from a GoldenEye still, but on with the game anyway. We go into the first level, which, like every version of this game, takes place during Bond's retrieval of Sir Robert King's money from a Swiss banker in Spain. Erminar are on hand to very briefly set out your objectives, and good luck coming into this game if you haven't seen the film, because the limited text on display throughout these briefings is really not going to tell the story for you. Rather, because this game came out in the Iron Age, you actually had to consult the physical manual that came with the game, and fair play to the thing, it does actually keep Elektra's role as a villain a surprise. Mission 1 and it's off to Bilbao. The Guggenheim building is a strange enough looking structure in real life, never mind in 8-bit, so bless whoever was tasked with creating this image. For the most part, this is a top-down perspective shooter game, and this is the James Bond avatar that you control throughout, which weirdly seems to be more based off of his nuclear bunker jumpsuit look than any other outfit that he wears in the film, which is a little odd to me. I think it would have been more appropriate if he were just in some generic suit for the duration of the game, but okay, Bond's the blue jumpsuit guy, I guess. Before throwing you into the action, the first part of the level gives you a little time to get used to the movement controls. It's quite simple stuff, and you just need to walk around this area, find the access card for the lift, and then it's up to Lachez's office for an exchange with the banker. Then suddenly he's lying down on the floor, and that's even before you activate the flashbang that the game doesn't actually tell you about, and it only stuns the 2 goons for about 2 seconds, and then it's time to get a taste of how combat works in the game. Oh boy, this is going to be a long playthrough. Yeah, look, this is a Game Boy Color game. I'm not expecting it to be terribly smooth or advanced or anything like that, but to call this game clunky is being generous to it. It's easy enough to just press B to fling a punch or shoot a weapon, but lining up attacks is really awkward. I actually found just punching to be more effective than using the firearms, certainly in these first few levels anyway, but you have to be in just the right position, otherwise they just do nothing, and the guard AI is so limited that you can literally be throwing punches right next to them for ages and they don't even acknowledge that you're there. My fist is literally making contact with your body. How are you not noticing me? You are looking directly in my direction right now. I do not understand. Anyway, you pick up the briefcase and money in Lachez's office, and the rest of the level is just making your way down through the floors to get out of the building. The lift is broken, so you need to use the stairs. Mission objectives are tracked in the bottom right of the game screen by these balls?
Bolus 007.
At first I thought these were grenades, and I spent a little while trying to figure out how the hell I accessed them, but no, they are your objective meters, and each time you complete an objective, they change color. So yeah, after getting the briefcase, you just need to collect another key card, which is up on the roof terrace, and that'll get you out the front door once you eventually reach the ground floor. There are a bunch of goons to battle with as you make your way there. Health is measured by the red bar at the bottom left of the screen, and yeah, it's an easy enough introduction to the game. I guess it's good that it's light on objectives, it's very linear, it gets you used to the combat mechanics, so okay, a basic start, and things can only improve from here. Maybe. Completing the level takes you to the completion screen, and it's a bit of a shame really that you don't get an overall score or a bronze, silver, gold style medal system like other Bond games of the time. It just shows you your health percentage, how many bad guys you took out, how many objectives you completed, which seems a bit redundant given that if you're seeing this screen you presumably have completed all of the objectives, but anyway, you're treated to a heavily pixelated still from the film followed by an access code as your reward. Now, frustratingly, there's no level select menu in this game. When you select continue from the main menu, you need to put in a correct combination of icons to take you to a specific level. So there's no save function in this thing. If you want to stop playing, you need to be taking note of these access codes and which levels they correspond to. Otherwise, you're starting from the beginning every time you boot up this cartridge. The symbols themselves are like camera, microfilm, briefcase, glasses. I felt like Donald Trump doing a cognitive test when I was reading out the combinations to myself every time I had to use them to continue on with my game.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
Watch, briefcase, camera, nuclear hazard symbol. On to level 2, which, similar to level 2 from the N64 version of the game, takes place in MI6, which is overrun with enemy goons. You need to work your way through the environments to get to the Q boat, and objectives are largely focused around getting keycards and access codes. There are some extra challenges in here. There are these switches on the walls that you need to flip in a certain order to get through certain doors, and there are these laser tripwires. Jesus, security at MI6 is pretty steep even for its own employees, though I have to admit, I always enjoy Bond levels that let you mosey around MI6. Like, this level in the N64 version is one of my favorites from that game. I love the bit in From Russia with Love where you can just hang out in the place, but obviously this is a Game Boy game. It's not going to be as close to the film's representation of MI6 as those other games, but I will say that I do wish the environment would have taken a few more visual cues from the film at least. It does all just feel a little bit generic. I mean, some rooms are pretty cool though. I like this one with all the big screens in it. It feels like it's some kind of attempt to replicate that briefing room from GoldenEye, and there's the staff canteen, which we never see in the films, but hey, it's mentioned in the books, and yeah, I would love me a big bowl of grey and red slop. And then there's the MI6 library, which features this gigantic book. My god, it's the size of Bond. This is such an elaborate prop that I assumed it must have been something to do with an objective. I spent a little while trying to activate something, because to be honest, the interactable elements, like some computers and switches and stuff, don't really stand out amongst just like environmental props, so I'd spend a bunch of time just like seeing if I could activate anything that I came across. Oh, a red button? Well, that must absolutely be something if I press it. No, okay, guess not. You get an access code from one of the computers, which you can then use to access some rundown vault where you get the keycard to enter Q's lab, and I have to say that I quite like the sprite for the Q boat. I think it's really cool, and getting to the boat is the end of the level. Into level 3, NM informs you that it was the woman who killed Lachez in Bilbao who was also behind the attack on MI6. Wait, Lachez was killed by a woman in that first level? What? He was just on the floor after the dialogue exchange. There isn't even a hint as to how that happened in the first level, but okay, whatever. Just 2 objectives in level 3, get to the tube station and chase the cigar girl. Again, this all feels very similar to the corresponding level from the N64 version of the game. You're fighting your way through goons on the docks for much of the first part of the level. Some of these guys are just here with endless streams of grenades, and there's a particularly aggravating section where there are mines on a particular stretch of the dock. No indication, no clues as to where they are. It's just a case of trial and error until you work out the safe route. And I feel like you get this in a lot of games of the time where you just kind of have to fail over and over again in order to succeed. They aren't going to give you any hints or clues or tells as to how to accomplish a certain objective. No wonder I have so many trust issues growing up on games like this. Next up is a big warehouse, which is a bit of a maze. You just need to go around flipping switches to move crates out of the way in order to get access to the tube station, the entrance to which is located here inside the warehouse. God, commuting in London is painful enough as it is. I don't need to add a whole warehouse labyrinth to my journey just to reach my damn train. I can only assume that whoever designed this level had never visited a London tube station, because the whole thing is more like a Parisian catacomb crossed with a Roman Colosseum. You just need to work your way around some security barriers and collect some mines, which you can use to destroy some crumbling pillars to make your way to the end of the area. Again, just going back to my point about it being difficult to distinguish which environment elements are interactable or to do with completing your objective, the only thing here to indicate what to do is a few extra cracks on the pillars to separate them from the non-explodable ones. It's tasks like this where R's briefings could possibly be more useful. Like, his advice is kind of pointless for the most part. For this level, for instance, it's just make sure you bring back that boat in one piece, and you're not even driving the boat through the level, so using that space for something actually helpful would have been good. Like, I don't know, look out for the Q mines I've placed in the station. They'll help you blow your way to victory. And you know a thing or two about blowing, don't you, 007? Anyway, level 3 ends rather unceremoniously. You just exit, and that's it. I mean, to say that one of the original objectives was chase the cigar girl, it's amazing that the cigar girl has no presence in this level, and at no point do you chase her. I mean, she's not even in the ending still frame, and then it's just straight into your next briefing with them telling you need to suss out the traitor in Elektra's inner ring, and you'll get to know a thing or two about Elektra's inner ring. But yeah, just from a storytelling perspective, the game really makes very little effort to try to tell a coherent narrative. Even the booklet doesn't fill in the gap regarding what happened to the cigar girl. There's no mention of a exploding hot air balloon, no tumble onto the Millennium Dome, no not from him, just nothing. Now, obviously, I'm very much aware of technical limitations of the hardware and whatever, but just a bit of text from M to at least cover the base would have been appreciated. Yes, it would have been overly expositional, perhaps, but it would have been something.
Welcome back, 007. I hope your shoulder isn't hurting too much after that tumble onto the Millennium Dome after the cigar girl blew up that hot air balloon you were clinging to the rope from, killing herself in the process. Anyway, we need you to find the traitor inside King Industries.
For level 4, the story for what it is really does skip ahead, and we forego any skiing level, meaning that this is the only World Is Not Enough game adaptation without a level titled Cold Reception. Anyway, this is a stealth-based level where you need to stalk Elektra's head of security Davidov around the house and grounds of Elektra's mansion. I feel like it's become a bit of a running thing when I talk about stealth-based levels in Bond games that I'm always like, personally, I'm like, I don't like stealth levels, and then I play it, and then I'm actually like, oh, actually, I don't mind this one so much, I think it's pretty good. This is not one of those instances. This level, oh my god, if any Bond video game level has ever made me wish I were exploding along with the cigar girl on a hot air balloon, it's this one, as well as maybe the skiing level from 007 Legends, oh, and the Whaling level from Tomorrow Never Dies, oh yeah, and that forklifts bit from 007 Racing, but definitely this one too. Objective-wise, it's simple enough, but a stealth-based level that involves evading guards when the guard AI is so terrible is just an awful decision. It is so inconsistent. I don't know how I can glide past this particular guard and escape completely undetected, and yet the same thing doesn't work on this other guard. These trip lasers are beyond irritating. Sometimes I swear I don't even touch them, and a guard will still appear out of nowhere. I don't know if I triggered the guard by running into the laser accidentally, or whether this level is just so broken that I am indeed being expected to evade guards that aren't even on the screen in that moment. The most annoying thing about this is that if you're spotted, that's it, completely. The mission is failed, back to the start of the level you go. In most other Bond games, this tends to work, these stealth-based levels tend to work like, yeah, you might get spotted, but so long as you subdue the one guard before they can raise the alarm, or indeed quickly just get out of their view, it's okay. Not here, though. Things get especially weird in the next part of the level. So, you're in the grounds, and there's this hedge maze that you have to navigate through. You can pick up a silenced P2K from one of the garden sheds, and probably more usefully, a taser. there are still plenty of guards around, and they're just as annoying and dumb as they were in the house. I mean, look at this monstrosity, for God's sake. It's a stealth level, and I'm literally stood right next to a patrolling guard and nothing. And I know, earlier on I was complaining that it's too easy to fail, and now I'm saying it's too easy to succeed, and yes, it's wildly inconsistent, and that's part of why this game is so infuriating for me. Also, similar to having to destroy those Roman pillars in the last level, this one requires you to blast away a totally unsignposted bit of scenery in order to proceed, because obviously you have to shoot at a hedge in order to open up the entryway. How silly of me not to realize this. Aren't I just an idiot for roaming around this environment for ages thinking, what would the Bondian thing be to do here, when really all I needed to do was some hedge trimming with a P2K?
Hey, Bond. You do any gardening?
Why, yes, actually I do. And that's not even the half of it, though. Like, right, there are these cracks in the ground. If you walk over them, it creates a hole. Okay, fine. But if you go over them, and then it's a dead end, and none of the hedges are reacting to any of my bullet fire, so I have to head back over them, and entering into the hole teleports you back into one of the garden sheds you previously passed, and I have no idea why this happens. Presumably going into one of these holes doesn't just kill you, because if it did, you'd be starting the level over from scratch, but I can't begin to fathom, like, what the logic here is behind the holes leading back to these sheds. Like, are there tunnels underneath Electra's complex here? Are there mole people living beneath this hedge maze? What is the thinking behind this? Well, at least we have the taser now, which is effective at taking out guards in one go if you can sneak up behind them. So the final portion of this level involves stalking Davidov as he makes his way through some kind of canyon. I don't really know what environment this is supposed to be. It's tricky because you need to stay close enough to him that he doesn't leave your sight, but not close enough that he'll spot you, and he's behaving about as erratically as a wound-up house cat. Like, he's walking, and then running, and then making an about turn, and sometimes he's just standing completely still, and I'm at what I think is a safe distance, and then, out of nowhere, he just spots you, and then it's mission failed, and because there are no checkpoints at all during this game, if you fail, even in this last section, it sends you all the way back to the beginning, so you can relive this tedious nightmare of a level over and over and over again. Okay, I'm done ranting. Actually, no, I'm not, sorry, one more thing. As you're stalking Davidov, it gradually gets darker and darker in the environment, and I don't quite know why, because I thought the premise of this level was that you're leaving Electras in the middle of the night anyway, whereas this makes it seem like it's just sunset and nightfall is drawing in, or maybe I've been playing this game for so long that indeed an entire day has passed in the meanwhile. Anyway, so I'm playing this on an emulator on my Mac, and I had to bump up the brightness just to make out what was going on. I can't imagine playing this on a Game Boy Color back in the day with its lack of backlit screen. I'd have been racing to the nearest lamp while multitasking, trying to stay at a suitable but safe distance away from Davidov while trying to find enough light that I can just play the game. This level is merciless. So I was playing this game for the purpose of this review, for recording the footage and stuff. I was playing on an emulator on my Mac with a PlayStation controller, and through the emulator I was able to create my own save points. And whenever I do a video on a Bond game for the channel, I really do try my best not to do that, because I like to experience these games as much as how they were originally intended. So I like to rely on in-game checkpoints and saves and such. For this playthrough though, that principle flew out the window quicker than Pierce Brosnan with a briefcase full of cash. Like, my god, you can be 95% through a level, and if you die, it still sends you right back to the beginning. If I'd have had this game as a kid, I could guarantee you that I would never have made it through. I would have just given up at this level after several infuriating attempts. And it's frustrating because it's not hard by way of the game itself actually being difficult. It's hard by the way of just tedium and just having to repeat things over and over and over again, which ultimately just doesn't make for a very satisfying experience. But yeah, but apart from that, I'm having a great time. It's not even over yet, right? So you follow Davidov, he picks something up off of a dead body. This is presumably Dr. Arkov, but the game ain't gonna fill in that blank for you, after which Bond goes up to Davidov and throttles him, and then the final objective of the level is to get to the airfield undetected and get onto the plane. So, oh good, more guards to evade, and this time in the dark. Things are helped immeasurably by some IQ night vision glasses that you can pick up, and this is a really expansive bit of map, to say there's not all that much to do in it, and I don't know if I was just exhausted, or maybe I'm just dumb, because I spent an inordinate amount of time just wandering around this bloody place, trying in vain to find out where I needed to be. I mean, given that some scenery in the levels react to weaponry, I was just shooting at any vaguely suspicious-looking wall or a rock that I'd come across, because I would wonder if, like, is the airfield behind it? Do I move the rock and go into a tunnel which teleports me to the airfield? Who's to say with this game? But no, it's just, you have to just go under this archway, and that's it. You're at the airfield, and not a moment too soon, one of the most annoying, frustrating video game levels I have ever played. But at least it can't get any worse, surely? Alright, mission 5, and Emma's just given up on the briefings completely at this point. She just says, keep a low profile, like, okay, great, and yeah, indeed, the level is just more avoiding guards, which sort of undermines the whole objective of the previous level, that you had to assume Davidov's identity. It was the whole point of it, and why did I have to do that if I still need to avoid all the guards anyway? But yeah, you're in the bunker in Kazakhstan, and you need to find Christmas is the objective, and no, that doesn't involve acquiring a calendar to point to December 25th on, but rather finding nuclear physicist Christmas Jones, and to the level's credit, I think that this is one of the nicer looking levels of the game. I think that this environment is quite nicely realized. I'm frustrated that it's just more stealth stuff immediately after the previous level. It's all just feeling a bit repetitive at this point, having to avoid the guards, going from room to room just to open doors to other rooms, but you do eventually meet up with Christmas, who takes you down to a lower level where you find Renard, or at least I think that the bald purple wearing man is Renard. But yeah, so much for feeling repetitive. The game now throws a real curveball 5 levels in, and suddenly turns into a platformer of all things. Suddenly I'm having flashbacks to playing the Sega Mega Drive Bond game The Duel, and whilst I didn't exactly adore that game, playing this really makes me appreciate The Duel in ways I didn't think possible. The controls and mechanics here are beyond clunky. It's really simple stuff in theory. There's a lot of jumping over spikes on the ground, hopping from platform to platform and avoiding grenades dropped by goons, but my god, it's just beyond frustrating to play, and really disappointing, because after a level and a half of agonizing stealth mechanics, I was so ready for something more actiony and fast-paced, and oof, this is not that. This is just bad all around. And it doesn't get any better. So after making your way to the end of the thing, you see Renard take off in the lift. It activates a bomb, and so you must head back the way you came, except all of the doors are shut, but thankfully some mines have appeared, and you just need to blow through the doors in turn. The jumping mechanics are just beyond clunky and incredibly slow. It's really hard to react when things are moving at such a glacial pace. Again, it feels like the ambition of the concept couldn't be matched by the programmers, so it feels like something that could and indeed should work, but, well, I mean, I'm speaking from my own perspective here, of course, but I think that this level is just a complete failure. Or maybe I'm just salty, because when I actually did get to the end of the level and technically complete it, the wall of fire caught up to me, and I just had to do the whole thing again.
Bugger. My sentiments exactly.
But after I'd thrown my computer out the window, fumed for about an hour, and then retrieved it, I did eventually succeed, and then it's the end of the level as you escape with Christmas up the lift and into Mission 6, which takes place around Zukovsky's Caviar Factory. And after 2 fairly excruciating levels in a row, I was not looking forward to this stage of the playthrough. I came into this being like, oh my god, it couldn't possibly get any worse, could it? Well, no, it couldn't, actually, because I actually really started enjoying the game from this point. With the stealth mechanics, if we're going to generously refer to them as that, thankfully behind us, this was back to punching and shooting goons as you do the usual stuff of walking around the map, trying to find keycards and opening access to areas and so on. I've neglected to mention so far, but your arsenal does expand beyond the P2K quite early in the game, to be honest. There are machine guns to use and the like. They fire a bit more rapidly, but it's still pretty much 4 shots to kill almost every goon you come across. I like this environment, this Caviar Factory. It's on multiple levels, and you use these lifts to go between them. It's pretty expansive, but not so expansive that it becomes overwhelming. I'm trying to compliment what I can here, because obviously this is relative to the game's status as a Game Boy game. I mean, let's not get too carried away here. The level earns extra points for this wonderful Zukovsky sprite, though. I love how he's just constantly waving at you. He's so happy, or maybe he's shaking his fist at you. 2. It's kind of hard to tell, but once you've met up with him, it's into the final stage of the level, which is a kind of boss fight, I guess. It's pretty much the biggest boss fight of the whole game, with one of the buzzsaw helicopters. This is another platforming segment, and one that I think is much more successful than what I experienced on the previous level. It's just you against the helicopter, and you're going up and down ladders and jumping around the platforms like it's Donkey Kong, and I love that you can use the car missiles to get a few shots in on the helicopter before it comes and destroys the BMW. I thought that this was a really nice detail from the film that was worked in here, and once the car is destroyed, you then have to pick up a grenade launcher to finish the job, and yeah, God help me, I was actually having fun doing this. And after all those hours I spent chasing Davidoff around a poorly lit canyon, I think I'd forgotten what fun was. Into level 7 next, which begins with a briefing from Robinson, who just says, "This isn't looking good, 007, and then it's up to R to actually fill you in on the plot when he tells you that M has been kidnapped. I mean, again, this is breezing over a huge chunk of the story, and you pick up at the start of the level with Bond in Elektra's torture chair. Good luck following this if you haven't seen the film, but yeah, you get told to press A and then B, and I was doing this, but my health kept depleting anyway. Like, I've seen other playthroughs of the game on YouTube where players were able to save much more health than what I got to keep, but anyway, after an awkward 60 seconds or so of this, Bond breaks free and then either locks Elektra in a room or she locks herself in there. I'm not quite sure what the intention is here, but whatever, there's an 8-bit Judi Dench cold and starving in a cell somewhere in this tower, and we need to find her. Again, God help me for saying this, but I actually had some fun playing this through. The level design is absolutely giving me Scottish Castle rather than Turkish Tower, which is where we're supposed to be. It's supposed to be Maiden's Tower in Istanbul, but whatever, it's a cool environment all the same. You eventually come across some holding cells in the bowels of the place, and you can use your laser watch to open the doors. However, you only have the power to open up one cell door at a time, and if you want to open more, you have to then go and collect a respawning battery, which is located underneath this explosives delivering pipe that I guess all castles have. If this game is doing anything in the way of collectibles or bonuses or what have you, this might have been a worthwhile exercise. Like, if they were doing the golden 007 token thing, and they could be tucked away in places around levels, including these cells, it would just add to the replay value, but as it is, there's very little value in any of these, and there's 5 of them, so it's really not worth going to the effort of the there and back a bunch of times just to open the cells. Other than the important one, of course, when you're inspecting the area, you'll see a little grey head popping up through the bottom of the screen to indicate exactly which one contains M, who is positively overjoyed to be freed. It's hard to imagine Judi Dench doing jumping jacks as a method of celebration in the films, but I guess she's been cooped up for a while, and it's important to keep the circulation going. Now it's off out to the docks to get aboard Renard's submarine. I was half expecting Elektra to pop out at some point around here to give you an excuse to shoot her, but this is actually the last that we see of Elektra in the whole game, when she was either locked or locked herself into this small room earlier on. It makes you wonder why they bothered to include her in the game at all. I mean, everything feels so stripped down. It basically just comes down to Bond versus Renard. I kind of wish they just kind of fully committed to that and just stripped it back even further, because there's clearly no desire to tell the Elektra story of bitterness and betrayal, so why half-arse it? Actually, this isn't half-arsed, this is more like 1/8 arsed. Anyway, it's only a brief fight along the docks, and it's into the submarine for level 8, the final level of the game, which, in keeping with every other video game based on this film, sees you battling your way through the vessel to stop Renard. First objective here is to destroy the control room, and again, this continued something of a surprising streak for me of actually kind of having something resembling fun while playing through, well, certainly the first bit of this level anyway. I think it's another really nice environment. You have to just work your way through the space, there's plenty of guards to battle, you need to pick up the remote mines, which you can then take the control room and use to destroy the machinery, and that'll take 6 remote mines in total. It really did get me thinking around this point, like, maybe I just got off to a bad start with the game. This is the 3rd level in a row that I'm actually quite enjoying, and maybe it just took me a little while to get into the swing of things, to appreciate what I was playing and contextualize it. I mean, sure, the stealth mechanics were pretty awful, but perhaps that's my own personal bias. Maybe it's not that bad after all. Oh, no, wait, it really is. Yes, we come to the final stage of the game. I hasten to call it a boss battle because it feels like that's massively overselling it. It's back to platforming mode as you make interminable jump after interminable jump to reach the top of the reactor room from where Renard is dropping grenades. So I actually really like platformer games. The first video game I ever remember playing was Super Mario All-Stars on the SNES, and I've been a devoted Mario player ever since, and then I've played, things like Sonic, Banjo-Kazooie, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Donkey Kong, any number of Disney movie tie-in platformers like Lion King and Aladdin, Rayman, Cuphead, and so even though I'm not a devout gamer necessarily, I still think that I speak with some authority when I say that this is one of the worst platformer game experiences I've ever had. I was just finding it beyond insufferable, to be perfectly honest. The lack of precision, the cumbersome pace of the movement, you have to get onto some incredibly small, tight ledges, which is fine in concept. Like, obviously it's going to be tough, it's the final level of the game, but the controls being as clunky as they are, it's just a slog to get through. I do want to make the point here, though, that if this game had the precision of control of a Super Mario Bros., for instance, then this would actually be a doddle to get through. It's not that the level design is challenging or thoughtful. The only thing making this game difficult is that the controls make it like you're trying to play the thing with boxing gloves over your hands. I'm just really disappointed with this being the final stage of the game, particularly compared with how much of a better time I had with the ending of the Caviar Factory level against the helicopter, which I thought was much more successful and rewarding to play. Though what's even more disappointing than the platforming section, though, is the final showdown, do we call it, with Renard. So you finally get through the perpetual platforming, and it's up to the top where Renard is. He's got Christmas Jones hostage. I'm gearing up for a firefight, a fist fight, a boss battle with the villain, essentially, and this is how it goes down. Yeah, you don't even get to control that, by the way. You don't get to press any buttons, it's just the game takes over for you and throttles Renard, and that's it. I mean, given that both of the other adaptations of The World's Not Enough for video game form depended on you getting to a certain point in the level, pressing a button, and then that would impale Renard with his own nuclear rod, as in the film, I would have thought that the Game Boy would have tried for something similar. Like, even if it's just you get to the top of the ladder, press a button, and then a little thing comes flying in to kill Renard. But no, a good throttling is just as satisfactory, I guess. It really feels like all involved were just ready to pack it up at this point, and beyond an 8-bit recreation of Bond and Christmas firing out of the sub's torpedo chute as the thing explodes, that is it for The World Is Not Enough on the Game Boy Color. This is easily one of, if not the, most bare-bones Bond game releases I've encountered so far. There is really no incentive at all to replay this thing. There isn't even a higher difficulty setting or anything like that. No high score tracker, no challenges, no link-up multiplayer, no tokens to collect, no nothing. It's like it's daring you to pick it up again. And fine, if that's the case, you win. The World Is Not Enough for the Game Boy Color. I will never play you again. Worst Bond game I've played so far? It's hard to say. I mean, I had less of a good time with that James Bond 007 Atari game, and 007 Legends is still probably my most disappointing Bond game experience, but relative to the times in which the games were released, the hardware capabilities available to them and such, oh yeah, I think this might be my least favourite Bond game ever. It's the kind of gameplay that depends entirely on trial and error, and the fact that dying throws you right back to the start of any level just irks me beyond all reason, particularly when the game does things like random bombs beneath walkways that you can't tell where they are, and there's no way to figure it out without just blowing yourself up a bunch of times, and any replay value that this thing might have is comprised entirely of having to repeat levels over and over and over again just to complete the basic objectives, which I found very frustrating. It's a shame because I do think there are some good concepts in here. I liked the boss fight with the helicopter, using the missiles on the BMW was fun, some of the maps were nice to navigate around, but it's really not worth the aggravation of persevering through those god-awful stealth levels. Ooh. Though there were definitely a few levels where I felt something resembling fun, but not enough to outweigh the clunky combat system, the repetitive objectives, the borderline sinful platforming segments, but worst of all, I just never feel like I'm really experiencing the world of James Bond when I'm playing this game. Yeah, there are bits of Bond theme in the music, and yeah, there are a handful of places where gadgets gadgets come in handy, but the design is very generic. There's really no attempt at all to tell a Bondian story, and given this game was coming out nearly 2 years after the film it's based on was released, I can only imagine a lot of kids and people playing it and just having completely forgotten plot details from the film and whatnot, but the story really only makes sense in the game if you have some familiarity with the story from the film. I guess if I can give some compliments to the thing, that, well, for a Game Boy Color game, I think it does look pretty good. I went and looked at other Game Boy Color titles from the time, like Metal Gear Solid, like Perfect Dark, and I do think that The World Is Not Enough at least holds its own next to those, and the music too I do think is fine for what it is. I'm really kind of baffled that this thing had as good reviews as it did around the time of its release, like average to slightly above average. This is worse than any of the Game Boy Color games I remember having or playing, or maybe I was just very lucky with my sporadic game choices at that time, but yeah, what can I say? I don't think that there's any reason for even the most ardent of The World's Not Enough fans to go to the effort of seeking this thing out, especially when the far superior PS1 and N64 versions of the game are available, and are a much better way to get your retro Bond gaming fix. So it finally happened, I guess. They made a World Is Not Enough thing that I really don't like. I suppose that's a feat in and of itself. But did you play this game on its initial release? Did you play it authentically on the Game Boy Color? And what was your experience with it back then? I would absolutely love to know. Did you pack it in at levels 4 and 5 as I would have done? Please do let me know in the comment section below. And of course, there's all the usual links to my socials below. There's the subscribe button and the Mrs. Bell notification button if you want to stay up to date on future video uploads on this channel. And with all that being said, and until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.